Hello and welcome to episode 82 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is a man who recently photobombed a surfing competition dressed as a shark, Greendragoon.
Yeah, and I took first place.
And Motor Trend's pickup truck of the year, Markhawkman.
Yeah, okay, I don't know what to do with that one.
All right. Well, it is just the three of us tonight, but that's okay because we're going to do this a little bit more truncated than usual because we all want to watch Captain Smirk's live stream, which is going on later this Wednesday evening. He's going to show off the revamped winter event, the Winter Wonderland. It's gotten a facelift this year, as well as a couple of new events and some new rewards as well. So we're all looking forward to that. But first, we do have some Foundry news. One item, let's see, the T6 ships have made it into the costume creator. So that's the three Fed Intel ships, the Guardian and the Dauntless. Should point out that the Guardian does not, if you're looking down the list, it does not say Fed in front of the Guardian like it does for almost every other Fed ship. So if you're looking for it, that's where it is. Just search for Guardian. The KDF Matha Raptor and the Kib, or however you pronounce that, Intel Cruiser. The Cruiser also does not have KDF in front of it. And finally, the Fate and the ALAL for the Romulans. Those are all in. The new Cruiser for the, Carrier, for the Breen is not yet in. But I imagine that model will be updated, so I think it should be in the NPC, the pre-made NPC list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually specifically looked for that last time I was in the Foundry, and we do have, something in there, but it's the old one from when they first added the Breen to the game.
Yeah. Check after tomorrow's patch. It may be updated.
I'm expecting it will, because last time they updated the Breen ships for the winter event, the change, it was one of those ripple effect things where they made it one change that affected everything.
Yeah, usually when they update a mob like this, it'll ripple down to the Foundry.
Now, I should say not always, though, because we, as I was looking through all of these things, I noticed that we do have the Apex battleship, the Hirogen Apex, in the costume creator, but when you go over to the pre-made NPCs and look at the Hirogen Dreadnought, it's actually the old version that they that was with launch.
Did the random Hirogen mobs get updated to use the new Apex?
I'm pretty sure they did. So that I would bet you that in pre-made NPC is the only place that model exists anymore in the game.
Be weird, just like a treasure trove of lost stow history.
A little bit,
the older space dock, old versions of missions.
Because they can't remove these things sometimes because that would break people's missions.
Well, we also have several bits of leftover debris from when Perpetual was running the game.
Yeah, you were noticing that in Wolf 359 here, which is where
I hate
we
to
are
say it, that was about
sitting.
all there ever was of Perpetual stow.
Yeah, just a few Starship designs and some dreams.
This is true, but it's nice to look at and make fun of every now and then.
I'm pretty sure that's why it got included. Because you'll notice whenever you went into like Deep Space Encounter, there was one of those Perpetual design ships there sitting as a wrecked Hulk.
Yep.
Again, the devs might have been poking a little bit of fun of it.
It's the only remaining remnants.
Actually, for a long time, one of those was actually one of the standard loading screens until they did that contest where they replaced most of the loading screens with player-made stuff.
Which included several Foundry authors as well, were winners.
Oh,
in that
yeah.
one. So, Dragoon, tell us about the other piece of news that we have.
Well, we finally have a new Foundry challenge. Smirk announced just a day or so ago that Foundry challenge number 10 is beginning. titled New Year's Eve 2409. In his words, this Foundry Challenge creates a mission that's main story plot revolves around the passage of our first official New Year's Eve in Stowe since launch. The year has changed over from 2409 to 2410, and with our own real-life New Year's Eve fast approaching, we can take the time to tell the tale of what happened across the quadrants to your crews, the crews past, and the crews of future on this special night. It is a night known for new resolutions, making new friends, and rejoining old friends long missed. Did your crew host a party aboard ship? Did they attend one on a colony world or space station? Maybe the mission was one of a tragic accident that transported players into some other time unknown. These stories can be told from many perspectives, perhaps from that a young human cadet who is counting down the hours to their first mission, or a seasoned Klingon warrior ready to face the battles ahead, while still honoring the sacrifices of those who have been lost along the journey. Maybe a cold and bitter Vulcan is visited by spirits of the past who try to warn him of his impending fate. Take the potential player along for the ride as you tell the story about the passage of time in Stowe and what it means to your captains and their crews. The sky is the limit when it comes to Foundry creation, and I know we have many talented authors who can spin tales into Foundry gold. Show us what you can do on a tight deadline, much as the world of game makers are tied to, and touch our hearts with stories of the first ever New Year's celebration in Star Trek Online.
So what is the deadline?
The deadline is actually New Year's Eve, December 31st. We actually have to get it out that morning, or publish that morning. You can find more details in the Foundry subforum, or there's also been a post on the main website. It's a shorter timeline this time. We've only have about 4 weeks to make these missions, and it's going to be followed by 2 weeks of voting.
Yep.
So obviously this kind of presents a new challenge, but if any of you authors remember back to some of the like 24-hour or Foundry challenges or the 2-day Foundry challenges that used to be hosted on like Starbase UGC and stuff, then this should still seem quite easy to them.
Now, I personally, I'm sending this one out, but I do think it's a fun challenge. I was joking with Hippie in the chat room the other day, and he was asking me, so if you did make one, what would you do? And I said, Admiral Quinn gets drunk at a New Year's Eve party and hilarity ensues. He wakes up, and I kept going. I was like, he wakes up on Ryza with no pants, having restarted the Dominion War, and somehow married his secretary.
No, I'm really sorry you're not making that.
I'm a little sorry too. But, if there's anybody out there listening to this, that idea is up for grabs. Take it, run with it.
There you go. Free Foundry idea.
There you go.
I personally...
one thing I was just pondering is coming up with an explanation for why some of the saucer pieces of the Rex ships here at 359 are as big as my Halo. And it's just a saucer.
They don't build starships like they used to?
Apparently.
I was actually thinking it would be funny for someone to come up with a plot revolving around why it's been 24/9 for the past 4 years. Find out that there's been some kind of temporal loop occurring that they have to break. That's not what I'm doing, by the way. Another free idea.
But you are going to enter.
I am seriously thinking about it. I mean, right now I'm kind of playing around with the Foundry, seeing if any of my ideas could pan out. I won't say definitively that I'll have an entry, but I'm going to start working towards one.
Without giving away the story, can you tell us a little bit about your ideas?
I I do. It got me to thinking about kind of what was happening in the Stowe universe at the time of the changeover, because we know that the 2410 was officially declared at the beginning of surface tension. So
Mhm.
the New Year's Eve would have had to have occurred sometime between surface tension and step between the stars.
Yep.
So I'm kind of thinking of setting it around that time. The thing I'm going to try to do to make things interesting is I'm going to try and recreate a location in San Francisco. I'm thinking the Federation Council Chambers in San Francisco, and then try and include like some like streets. I'm kind of thinking something along the lines of a chase, um, where you have to chase after someone, and it runs you out of like the Federation compound and into like the streets of San Francisco, which is going to be a very interesting challenge because we don't have much in the way of Earth assets.
And
Um,
here's the other issue: is you don't have much in the way of time
that's true.
to do this, especially on Dragoon schedule.
I am thinking at best 3 maps. It's not going to be a
Yeah.
long mission.
You definitely want to limit yourself as far as that goes.
And once I have something built, you better believe I'm going to be copying and pasting. But I kind of want to like play around with it because I've been testing things out, and I'm pretty sure I can do a passable Golden Gate Bridge as long as you're not too close. And then
Yeah.
it's New Year's Eve, so it's the middle of the night, so I can go like
That'll help.
use the Nepata backdrop and make it really dark. Um, but I mean, it seems like something that should be doable. But yeah, it's going to be have some custom maps to it,
Mhm.
so it'll be a
You
trick.
and I were tweeting back and forth about this, and I was telling you that one of the advantages of San Francisco is that it gets that crazy fog, which gives you a perfect excuse to use fog on your map to hide stuff that would normally be there, but you can't
Yeah,
really build.
I played around with some of the backdrops that had fog, and I didn't see anything that I really liked. It
Mhm.
every one that had fog just made things really cloudy and overcast, and it didn't feel right. But I have been experimenting with those like giant nebulas that we have,
Yep.
like sinking them into the ground to see if I can do like a fog bank, like you showed me in those
There you go.
photos.
Yes, I went to San Francisco on vacation, not this summer, but the summer before, and went to the Golden Gate Bridge and was actually very near the spot where Cryptic built Starfleet Academy. Um, I was sort of on the north side of the bridge on that end, and that's Starfleet Academy's on the south side. And uh, the fog was so thick that you could only see one of the towers. In the other tower, all you could see, the far tower away from you, all you could see was the very tip top of it, and you could barely see the skyline across the bay. So, I mean, it gets crazy there. I mean, that was probably the foggiest day uh, of that whole week-long vacation is when I happened to be at the bridge. But it does happen.
Yeah, I've heard that area tends to have that a lot because, next to the ocean, warm, so you have high humidity almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and plus you have a lot of mixture of water between the ocean outside and the bay inside.
I thought the bay was mostly brackish or salty.
Don't suppose I can convince Taka to put the Bay Bridge asset into the Foundry in the next 4 weeks.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm pretty sure I figured out a way to kind of do it. And like I said, you're not going to be too close to it, so it's certainly not like a Starfleet Academy where it's right there.
Yeah.
So I don't need the super high detail.
Well, Cerberus Films built 2 different versions of the Eiffel Tower for our Purity series, and one of them was far off away in the background, so it seemed to work. Wasn't perfect, of course, but I think people know that those real life landmarks, we can't really get them perfect.
Yeah, I found with kind of maps like this is it's not about getting like one particular asset absolutely perfect. It's about getting a lot of assets mostly there, enough that the player has plenty of visual stimulus to keep them engaged.
Yeah, you make a rough outline that looks like what you're going for, and then if you have time, you try to figure out the details. If
I'm thinking my chase is going to play out loosely a little bit, kind of like how they did in that one Klingon mission where Drake escapes from the prison, and you have to go chase him down, where you're running around First City.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, at best, I think I'm going to do maybe 3 maps. Keep it to that.
I'm just thinking, I mean, so we don't know. We've talked about this before when Surface Tension came out, is that, we don't necessarily know when Egg was replaced with an Undine. So just off the top of my head, what you could do is you could chase around a potential Undine spy, but maybe you never find out who it is. This is all happening on New Year's Eve. And then in Surface Tension, you find out it was Egg.
That's a good idea. I was thinking about rogue Klingons trying to sabotage an under-the-table peace treaty or armistice.
There you go.
Well, one idea that just popped up in my head was the possibility of, attempting to find Egg's homeworld, only to realize that the Undine that replaced Egg did the crappiest job of duplicating his appearance ever, and that the rest of his race actually don't look like that.
There never was an Egg.
And maybe there is no Egg race.
No one in the Federation knew the difference because he was a member of such a minor race that there were only like 2 or 3 people in the Federation that actually knew what his race was supposed to look like.
Egg had no race. It was all a ruse.
Well, part of what I thought this particular challenge could benefit from is funny missions, humorous ones. But, it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a tricky challenge because, I mean, with a time limit imposed, you're almost kind of doing the Foundry equivalent of a short story.
Yeah.
And it almost requires a little bit different dynamic than doing a full-size mission. The cadence is going to be different. You have to hit your points in much shorter order. So, I mean, just kind of how to scale down that into a short story format.
So one of the things that I saw in the forums just earlier today that I wanted to mention is, somebody was saying how that for these challenges, it seems like it's confined to a very small group of RP-minded individuals, and to a certain extent they're right, but it's sort of by choice, is because I want to let everybody know, and obviously I don't know exactly who all the audience of our show is entirely, but still I want to let everybody know that really anybody can enter and make any kind of mission that falls within the challenge parameters. Whether it's a big story mission or some kind of other kind of mission, but anyone can enter, anyone can vote. They just have to make that choice and actually do it. So it's only if it's confined to one group of people, it's only because that group of people is taking the time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there have actually been in many of the past challenges, people submit entries that, were people that I had never even seen on the forum before. That, went, made something, put it up there for people to look at. Granted, some of them were not what I would consider to be good missions, but, that's one of the good requirement to be a person who is actually a good author for this. You can just do whatever you think would be an enjoyable mission and submit it.
And I think that's one of the great things about these Foundry challenges, that anybody can enter. You could be an established Foundry author with already a spotlight, or somebody brand new, or somebody who's been making missions forever and never just never wanted to advertise on forums, never wanted to do any of that. But you can still enter. Anybody can.
And
Actually,
we've had a
that
number
reminds me of my favorite piece of advice to new Foundry authors who are struggling with trying to figure out what to make for a mission. Write a mission that you think is enjoyable to play, and
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
let other people play it.
I was just going to point out that the Foundry challenges we've had a number of newcomer authors kind of gain notoriety by entering and winning the Foundry challenge.
Oh yeah.
So, in many ways,
I think P. Sutherland comes to mind.
yeah.
Because
So
I don't think he had been around much before he entered that challenge that he won. And his was an excellent mission.
yeah. So I mean, if you think you got the stuff and you got a good concept for the theme, you got nothing to lose by trying.
Mm-hmm. And I extend this to everybody out there. If you're not entering, you should be playing and voting. Because the more votes you get, the better.
Yeah, I mean, so stuff like Sutherland's Depths of Nukara Prime. Two things I noted about that mission while I was playing it is that, one, it was awesome. Two, it wasn't as though Sutherland made up the story specifically for the challenge. Because Sutherland's Foundry missions involve a race that he invented, and this was simply, yet another in the series of missions that he'd made using that race.
I think his was during the Tholian challenge.
I believe you're correct. So everybody get building, and we can't wait to see what you all come up with. But for now, let's move it along to what we've been working on. Dragoon, have you been working on anything else besides your playing around with some ideas for the challenge?
That's mostly been what I've been doing. Other than that, I just got that Odyssey Master Systems display done.
Which looks fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with it. Turns out, and it seems to be have been well received.
And you are taking requests as well, apparently.
Yes, if anyone is interested, contact me on Twitter, and I will give you a specialized version with the name of your ship. I'll swap out Enterprise for whatever your ship name is.
I got one with the USS Bismarck from my Foundry mission, Sink the Bismarck. I should have had you put in a little spot labeled Rogue AI in there, just for a little fun customization. But that's all right.
Rename the secondary engineering corps to... I don't know, what did you call your Rogue AI?
I called it Brunhilde.
There you go. Just name it Brunhilde.
It was an extremely long acronym that spelled out Brunhilde. There was a bit more comic relief in that mission than I normally put in, even though it was about a rogue AI that murdered a whole bunch of people. Gallows humor, I guess. Or dark humor might be the better way to go. All right, Mark, what have you been working
on? Did a little tinkering in the Foundry. The main thing that I got done was attempting to come up with a good way of representing a Gorgon in the Foundry. You may remember them as that one race in TOS that was an incorporeal entity that, while they had the ability to take on human form, they tended to be this form that looked kind of like a ball of fire, almost like a campfire floating above the ground or something. I should probably rewatch that episode just to make sure I got the image right, but anyways.
Do you remember what the name of the episode was?
Was that the one from And the Children Shall Lead?
Maybe.
The one with the
I
kids?
remember that the plot of the episode involved the Gorgon attempting to make himself more powerful by getting the children to worship him or something.
Yeah, I think that's And the Children Shall Lead.
Anyways, I decided to use the Gorgons in the mission because, you know, they were one of the races that you would encounter and have to fight, in a matter of speaking, in the old exploration cluster missions, but, you know, you didn't see them anywhere else in the game.
Well, we definitely have plenty of fires of various colors available.
The thing I came up with to emphasize the whole unearthly aspect of it is that, see, when the Gorgon took on a human form, it was like a hologram that glowed green instead of being a true color hologram. So what I did is I took a small green fire and stuck it inside an orange fire, and then, you know, stuck a steam or cloud effect around the outside. Yeah. Anyways,
Definitely sounds like something that would take a combination of effects.
yeah, I haven't exactly figured out the whole plot of this yet, because one thing that I've realized with this project is that I'm going to be writing 4 different stories, and I actually want them to be, you know, interesting enough stories that people are going to like the mission. And also, I need to write the stories so that they have the same starting point, the same end point, and there are no actual objectives associated with any of the 4 stories. Sounds like fun, right? I haven't actually figured out what I'm going to do for stories 3 and 4 yet. Story 1 is, I've planned it to be completely non-combat, where you encounter a bunch of the aliens from the FGC-47 nebula who have somehow managed to find their way to this place. The basic idea I'm working with here is that these aliens were inspired by their visit from the Enterprise and decided that they wanted to find a way to explore the universe. And, well, you know, they being an energy-based race, they came up with this little trick for making, you know, small wormholes that they could use to travel places. And somehow one of those wormholes ended up wherever this place is. The Gorgon one, I created this race that I call the Dark Soldiers, which I actually kind of plotted them as being an R3 life form, and even though they look more or less humanoid, they're not. They just coincidentally resemble humans. And in case people are wondering, R3 life form is the whatever the heck Shellyak are.
I was never quite clear on what Chiliac are.
Exactly. No one is. It was never, ever explained, ever, except that Tholians have a certain level of radiation resistance that humans don't.
Mm.
Because the plot of the episode, and really the only thing we know about Tholian biology, is that this particular planet was ceded to the Shellyak by a treaty because of the fact that the radiation level on this planet was unsuitable for humans to live there. The Shellyak, however, didn't consider it to be an environmental hazard. Yeah, that's other than what Shellyak look like, that's the only thing we know about their biology. Hmm. Obviously, they're non-humanoid and possibly not an organic race. And one of the things I decided to play with is the fact that the Dark Soldiers, their actual biochemistry is partially silicon-based. because they only look like humanoids. Anyway, so yeah, I roughed out 2 or 3 other race ideas, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with the others. Although I was planning on making it so that one of the others is a race that ends up fighting the Dark Soldiers, but I'm not really sure what reason for that. Anyway.
Well, it sounds like you're definitely deep into plotting and
working on it anyways.
Yeah. Which is right about where I am for my new missions I've been working on. So I randomly, while I was watching The Hunt for Red October over the weekend, I randomly had the idea to do some historical missions, some historical holoprogram missions set during the Cardassian Wars, the first one, between the Cardassians and the Federation, which was something that kind of came out of nowhere in the 4th season of TNG, and my absolute favorite episode, The Wounded. Suddenly you find out that it's been a year since the Federation signed a treaty with the Cardassians that ended a long period of hostilities, which they called the war. And so through seasons 1 and 2 of TNG, there's this war with the Cardassians going on that's never mentioned. Obviously, because of course none of the writers had come up with the Cardassians yet, and they weren't setting up DS9 yet. Obviously, that was that's the actual explanation for why that happened.
It could be that was the declining years of the war. It wasn't like a hard and fast the war's over. It might have been a slow decline where the hostilities dropped and they finally solidified a treaty.
And that's kind of the assumption that I'm working on, is that it was essentially almost more of a Cold War.
Yeah, because
with flare-ups occasionally.
That I thought about while watching TNG is that the idea of having like an actual full-scale war with the Cardassians just didn't make sense in the context that we saw in the TV show, and that it really made more sense if it was like one of those limited hostilities thing where the Federation isn't willing to commit towards attempting to finish off the Cardassians, and they just simply beat the Cardassians back whenever the Cardassians attack.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I'm working on, is that sort of thing.
Of course, it could also be that the Enterprise just has a penchant for being able to avoid wars. I mean, they practically stayed out of the Dominion War.
Well, there was that one episode with the Talarians where they almost single-handedly fought a war with the Talarians. And the
Enterprise is good at almost starting wars.
Well, they had Picard.
But we do know a number of things about the Cardassian War, just from what characters said over the years. We know that Captain Picard and the Stargazer were involved in the war because Captain Picard and the Stargazer were trying to be an envoy to the Cardassians to try and end the hostilities at some point during the war, and they were attacked instead of received diplomatically, so that didn't go so well. Obviously, the war didn't end until many years later. We know that as a lieutenant, Catherine Janeway was involved in the war. She, at some point in Voyager, alludes to having fought a defensive battle at an outpost where she was ordered by her commanding officer to go out under fire and save the life of a wounded Cardassian soldier, which is something that she was very proud of later. We know that there was a massacre on Setlook 3, that Captain Maxwell lost his family there, and Chief O'Brien was there, and the USS Rutledge was there. So we know a few things that went on. And so I've started outlining this, the very first mission, and essentially what I would figure out is that I would do a mission at the beginning, a mission in the middle of the war somewhere, and a mission at the end to show how it ended and what led to this treaty. So the very first mission is that you're going to take the role of a captain who was around at the time and a ship that was around at the time. I'm leaving the ship class blank and I'm going to put in a note that says, if you would like to sort of RP with this mission, put yourself in one of these ships that would have been around at the time. Obviously, it could be Excelsior, could be Constellation, could be, for this first one, because it's 2347, could be Ambassador class. You can do that. There's any number of ships. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, here's a thought. I know we've talked in the past about making characters look really old to get around EULA restrictions for likenesses. Mm-hmm. What if we were to take that in the opposite direction and have really young versions of canon characters?
Like a really young Janeway.
A really young Janeway, or a really young
Chief O'Brien. Yeah. My plan was actually to mention these people plenty but only sort of interact with them. Like, I'm not sure where I'm going to put this, but I was going to have something where, like, okay, so Janeway was on the ground defending this outpost, and then eventually you were the ship that rescues her away team. And what you hear of it is your transporter officer says, Lieutenant Janeway and her away team are aboard, sir. And then you warp out to escape the Cardassians or something, things like that.
Or you could do something fun where you meet this NPC that's just labeled Starfleet Lieutenant, and she's talking about having just saved some Cardassian. You don't ever tell who she is, but just kind of leave hints.
Oh yeah, and I'm pulling in
make it look like a young version of Janeway.
There you go.
As much as the EULA will allow.
As much as the EULA will allow. Well,
no,
I'm trying to pull in.
What it is that you take the generic female character thing, tweak it to look a little bit more like Janeway, and then kind of like halfway give up on it because you can't actually make it look like her anyways.
Daniel Hunter in the chat room is asking. He says he can't remember how long the war lasted, and it says it's at least 20 years, because according to Memory Alpha, the Setlik 3 massacre, which is the earliest thing that we've heard about in this war, was 2347, and then the signing of the peace treaty was 2367. So we know it's at least 20 years that this conflict was going on. The entry on Memory Alpha says that it was essentially started with some border skirmishes, because there was an era where everybody was setting up colonies, the Feds and the Cardassians, in the same area, and they were disputing back and forth who had the rights to those systems, and that's how the conflict started. So that's what the first mission is going to show, is you're going to be this fictitious historical captain that I have you take the role of is going to be assigned to drop off some supplies and set up some listening posts at these border colonies, because there's tensions arising with the Cardassians. Eventually, there's going to be the Cardassians stop a Federation freighter. You go and confront them. They attack you. And then, of course, being Cardassians, they then come out publicly and say, you attacked them. And in retaliation, they move against a couple of Federation worlds. You go defend one of them. The other one is actually Setlik 3. So that's going to happen off screen. And, that's how the war starts.
Interesting.
And I'm trying to pull...
One of the things that occurred to me while I was pondering this is that while the Cardassian war was rather, shall we say, vicious, I never actually got the impression that there were, massive casualties from it. I mean, because I don't remember any instances where, you would have, like, the Cardassians, like, carpet bombing cities or anything like that. And obviously the Feds didn't do that either.
Yes, the worst thing we heard about was the Setlik 3 massacre, which they killed almost an entire colony. But that may have only been, a couple thousand people.
Yeah,
I say,
because
I say only. I mean, it's sort of horrible with any number of people.
one thing we've noticed in many, many episodes of Star Trek is that the Federation has this peculiar habit of establishing colonies on planets that are basically a token outpost. You have, however many people living there, and it's really the only presence on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, what would be considered a small town.
Yeah.
And that's it for the entire planet.
Well, it really depends on
probably
the
with the idea that it would grow eventually.
yeah, it really depends on the age of the colony, because a colony starts out with only a couple of hundred people, and then
so
the idea
you're
is
not
just
going to
slowly
take
grows.
you're not going to take 1 million people to a colony right away, for sure. And these are all these colonies are what eventually becomes the demilitarized zone that you see on DS9. So this is all leading up to the formation of the Maquis because of that treaty that ends this war.
Well, one thing they mentioned in several episodes as to why the Maquis did what they did is that at the end of the war, the Federation and the Cardassians sat down, their leaders drew a line on the map, and the one side of the line is Cardassian space, the other side of the line is Federation space, and that line had very little to do with who lived there previously.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, when I get to that end mission, and your captain finds out that all these places that you've been fighting for are suddenly on the other side of the line, that's going to be a frustrating moment. And I want it to be a frustrating moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was actually one of the TNG episodes that was actually talking very specifically about that, because it was the Wesley Crusher episode where they find the planet populated by Native Americans.
Yeah.
And
actually, that might be one of the planets that you'll visit in my missions.
The Native Americans are like, okay, well, we don't want to leave this planet, and the Cardassians rule the planet, so I guess that means we're Cardassian citizens now.
It's never said where he comes from, but I like to secretly think that that was Chakotay's home planet.
we know it was somewhere.
The Voyager writers apparently did tinker with the idea of making the characters in Voyager much more closely linked to the characters that we saw in TNG, because there is that thing with Tom Paris, and there are many, many similarities between Tom Paris and that one guy that Wesley Crusher went to the academy with.
Yeah, Nick Locarno. There's sort of conflicting stories on that. There's some people who worked on the show that said they didn't want to pay royalties to the original writer for using the character names. That's why they changed it. And then there's another one that says they wanted to create a little bit more sympathetic backstory for the character than what had appeared on TNG.
Yeah, because the one guy, the reason why he got kicked out of Starfleet Academy was basically criminal negligence. That was really the reason why he got kicked out of Starfleet Academy. Yeah. In Paris's case, I don't remember what he got kicked out for.
Lying to his commanding officer or something like that.
Ah, okay.
It was like absurdly similar. I mean, I think the only difference between the two stories was that Tom Paris was already an officer.
Yeah, he was already an Academy graduate.
And then he was Tom Paris one of those people that joined the Maquis after he got kicked out of Starfleet and then got sent to prison?
Yeah, basically he joined the Maquis, gets captured on the first mission he goes on, and then he gets sent to prison.
Yep. Well, one of the things I'm going to do with this missions is bring in as much stuff from canon as I can. So, like, all of the planets you'll see are ones that were either mentioned on the show as being in this area or seen on the show. So, like, for one of them, I'm thinking about using Hathon, the Bajoran city, because it looks kind of similar to some of the colonies that we saw on the show. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Bajorans in the area. There's going to be a lot of humans. There's going to be a lot of other Federation races in these colonies. So that's going to be fun. And then I'm even taking your commanding officer through all of this is going to be an Admiral Barnett, whose name briefly appeared on a casualty report in the Dominion War, which is about 7 years after the end of the first Cardassian War, or something like that. He briefly appears on a casualty report. So I took that and I was like, okay, so this guy, he was an admiral as an old man in the Dominion War. At the start of the first Cardassian War, he's going to be a young rear admiral and he's going to be the one giving you orders. So I'm pulling in a lot of threads like that from. Here's another fun one. I was looking on Memory Beta actually to see who was president in 2347, and it was Hikaru Sulu. So I'm going to have some mentions there.
You could do Sulu as an old guy.
Could. He'd be extremely old by then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to have to deal too much with the likeness problems there.
No,
because he's like
make
even older than he is now.
Yeah. Be fun to write a speech in that guy's voice. That would be fun. All right, so that's basically what I'm working on. I'm just sort of in the at the point of outlining the first mission, and then I've been in the Foundry a little bit to play with uniforms. For this first mission in 2347, you would be using the Wrath of Khan uniforms. It's always one of my favorite uniforms of Star Trek. But then for anything that I do later, sort of in the middle and the end, I'd be using the TNG Season 1 uniforms. And I discovered something that's missing from the Foundry as I was doing this, is that we don't seem to have the Constellation skin for the heavy cruiser. So I'm going to see if I can push somebody to get us that one. Maybe Zero will do it for us. All right, Mark, you've got a mission review.
Yes. Second. Here. I'm going to look it up in the Foundry just to double check and make sure I got the name spelled right. Okay, it is STQ-Star Trek: Quantum by NCC-2099. That's not Pax Federatica. That's someone else who has a name that starts with NCC. Anyways, the basic premise of the mission is it's one of those things where you need to stop this crazy man from messing up the timeline, which you go to this Federation experimental research laboratory that was attacked by a group of Romulans, apparently Imperial Romulans, and you find that the facility was working on something called blue matter, which, when used properly, would allow you to create a device that would observe alternate timelines and let you study them without affecting them. Or, if you're crazy and insane, you could, open a portal into a different timeline, possibly even the past of a different timeline, and, jump in. Which is, of course, the reason why the insane Romulan is there. So, he attacks the facility, steals what he needs, and then equips his ship with a device to jump into a different universe. It's not entirely he does specifically state that he's attempting to change the past. It's not entirely clear if he's trying to go to a different universe or not, which he does, but yeah, you know. And then, you know, something like 12 different map transitions later, you end up in the distant past, shortly after Kirk's father got killed in the JJ verse, and you end up at ESD 1.0. And that's where the mission ends, with you stranded in the past of a different universe. Because you can't get back to your universe without capturing the supply of blue matter that the insane Romulan has, and you haven't captured him yet. And, oh yeah, you don't actually have the calculations needed to make it work anyways. But anyways, overall, the plot of the mission, while it does seem a bit silly, actually did kind of flow reasonably well. It was kind of annoying how we seemingly spent more time jumping maps than actually playing missions, because he did this annoying thing where you ambush some guys on a planet, shoot a few people, then the villain runs away in his spaceship, and then you have to quickly beam up and chase down his spaceship, which, well, beaming down and beaming back up take longer than fighting the enemies on the ground. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was actually a pretty good mission. There were, you know, several eccentricities that were annoying, but you know, he did a good job of choosing appropriate settings for all of the maps. He didn't, you know, extensively customize everything, but the stuff that he did customize was reasonably well done. I mean, you know, one of them is this map where he actually made a custom map, which is basically nothing but this empty spot in the space between stars. I mean, that's literally all it is, because, you know, in this one jump, you that's where the portal leads you to. Actually, you know, one thing that I just thought of is that the mission reminded me somewhat of Sliders, where you jump through the portal because you, well, kind of sort of have to, and then you look to see where you ended up, and you don't really jump through the portal because you know where the portal is going.
Kind of creates some a fun aspect, though, that if you don't necessarily know what's on the other side.
Yeah, because once the bad guy gets the blue matter stuff, you actually do end up jumping through at least 2 portals in pursuit of the guy. The last one, he manages to exit the portal. Well, one thing that's explained here is that you and the other guy going through the portal, since you go through one at a time, it causes a sort of a time dilation effect, and the person who goes through first ends up farther into the past than the person who goes through second. So, you know, you go through a second after the other guy, and you arrive in the past a month or so later. Which, you know, makes it hard to hunt someone down.
Kind of like what I think it's kind of based off of what happened in the Star Trek 2009 film.
Oh, yes, of course.
With when you exit the portal is dependent on when you entered it.
Well, there are several things in the episode that are, I guess you could say, homages to the that film because let's see here. Well, the evil Romulan guy has this giant tattoo covering his forehead, and he's bald. That sounds familiar, right? But overall, though, it definitely felt more like an homage than a ripoff, and it was a lot of fun to play. You know, even despite the repetitive map loading.
Kind of want to go create a fan mission where you go save Spock from the alternate reality.
There is one thing about this particular mission that the author may or may not have been aware of that apparently most people were able to figure out because of the fact that when you look it up in the Foundry database, there are 6 reviews. Most of them are actually good. Is that he's rather vague in the mission's starting point. The only information that he actually gives you is that you need to go to Beta Lateri. Or is it Lanteri? Thing is, there is no actual mission in the galaxy map named Beta Lateri or there is a mission or there is a system named Lateri, but the whole beta thing doesn't usually get used as the name of a planet in a system. It usually gets used as the name of the system. Oh well.
All right. Why don't you say the name of that mission again, just to remind everybody?
Star Trek Quantum.
Cool.
Actually, if you just do a title search for Quantum, you should find it easily.
And it is out of review status, correct?
Yes. There's actually 60 reviews for it. And its average rating is slightly over 4 stars.
That's pretty decent.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So let's see. Any Burning Foundry topics you guys want to discuss?
I've got a topic, and it kind of ties into the Foundry Challenge and the shortened amount of time we have. Is recently Stoke content designer Sean McCann, who goes by Commander Ander on the forums, posted a blog on his personal site titled "The Art of Scoping." It's a really cool read into kind of some of the background workings of the Stowe team. But it got me kind of thinking on the subject of how does one go about scoping out a Foundry project? And especially,
so you might sort of define what scoping means.
Scoping means is working within the time constraints that you have or the resource constraints, planning for like a particular size and a particular deadline and stuff like that. And just making sure that your project is going to be reasonably doable ahead of time.
Reasonably doable. That's a good word for it. Very good phrase.
Obviously, as a
because no one wants to start a project that's unreasonably doable, right?
Unless you're me.
Unless you're a Dragoon. So I don't know. I mean, I've been obviously recently thinking up a new Foundry project. So I mean, I think the very first thing I was doing is getting a sense of what I wanted it to feel like, first of all. And then doing some research, because this is a historical event, so doing plenty of research on what we know. And then I sort of sit down, and I was talking about this in the previous show, and do an outline. of where I want the plot line to go. And then once I've got that, I can kind of figure out, okay, I need X number of maps. I need this space map. I need these foreground maps, and I need another space map, and I need another space map, or however it goes. And then I can start figuring out, it's like going from the widest possible feeling of what the mission is and slowly narrowing each specific thing down. That's how I do it. I don't know if that's at all what you're talking about, because I haven't read this particular blog.
And I'll include a link in the show notes for everyone who was interested. One of the things he does kind of identify early on is he says he identifies what the absolute bare minimum for what he needs to complete the mission. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of starts to build out from there. I mean, I personally am someone who can be very horrible about scoping, especially when it's a personal project.
So if you're thinking about sort of what is the bare minimum for a mission to succeed, you can kind of figure that out as to start with, as a starting point is what cryptic maps, what maps that are already there could I use to do this mission?
Yeah.
And figure out, sort of what one you could use for each one. And then you can start thinking, okay, maybe this one would be better if I did it as custom map, a sky castle. And, maybe this one could work, but it'd have to do a lot to it. And then you start figuring that stuff out.
Something else that he kind of talks about is reducing the clutter and looking for places where there's bad design that is kind of wasting the player's time.
I think for us, and Mark was alluding to this in his review, is that for Foundry authors, that's a big part of that is the number of load screens.
Yeah.
Because load screens effectively do waste the player's time because they got to just sit there. So, figuring out, so you don't have any useless maps, so you don't have any maps that you're on for 2 seconds. That's a big part of it.
But I mean, it's also things like establishing a goal early on of how long you want this mission to be. Before, not just relying on it's going to end up being however long it is, but figuring out, okay, so we want it to be a 30-minute mission. We need a big beginning, middle, and end. We want the climax to hit right around the 20-minute mark. And so we kind of need maybe 5 to 7 minutes for initial setup, and then a build up, and then hit the climax, fall off, big resolution, and then maybe a few minutes for wrap up. So things like that. And kind of planning all of those things out.
One aspect where that mission kind of fell short is because it tended to be, and then something happened, and then something happened, and then something happened. It didn't really have a well-paced story because, also the pacing got thrown off because of how much time you spent staring at loading screens.
Yeah, and that's something that isn't something obvious to a new writer-author, is the idea of pacing and that there should actually be a plan as far as how much of your mission should be devoted to this movement of the story and where you want your beats to hit. Okay, so these are the events that are really kind of the key events, and so you're gonna want to here and here. Then we want to have kind of a mixture of smaller events, but also rests, and kind of figuring out that push and pull of the plot.
There's a great video that I found on YouTube randomly just a few weeks ago. It's a lecture by Kurt Vonnegut, who's a famous author. The Slaughterhouse-Five is the book that I've read of his. And he's talking about story shapes, and he actually plots them out on a chalkboard. He uses two axes. One is the vertical axis is when things are good at the top, and when things are bad at the bottom. And then the horizontal axis is time. And so you can plot out the shapes of the story as you go along in time. When things go up for bad, down for, up for good and down for bad. And he said there's various different story shapes. One, you might start when things are good and something bad happens to people, and you want to be conscious of these shapes, and where you start out and where you want to end things. And I have found the link, and we will include it in the show notes.
Okay.
Because he has quite a good sense of humor as well, so it's a fun thing to watch. One thing that I was just thinking about, and this is something that has come up on the forums this week, in fact, is kind of the difference between backstory and plot. Because a forum user posted a very interesting backstory on the forums and was asking for some feedback on it. And I told him what you have is backstory. And I think what you need to ask yourself is, where does the player come in? Because, of course, as we always like to say, the player is the main character. So, having backstory isn't enough for a mission. You have to have a plot that involves the player in some way. And turns out he already did have this, and he didn't need to ask himself that at all. But make sure that when you're working on backstory, that you always have that plot in mind as well.
Yeah, that's actually the reason why I kind of got stalled on that Adwaita incursion thing, is because I realized that the script that I had written out in my head required me to tell the story from a third-person point of view, which doesn't work very well.
There are ways you can do it.
Yeah, but, it's...
The Foundry isn't necessarily set up
work
for that. You kind of have to get the player to go along with it. You can use somebody's memories, or make it a holodeck program like I'm going to be doing in this one.
In this case, you're exploring the interior of an alien ship, and a lot of the information comes from rummaging through the alien ship's computer data banks and replaying, recorded things.
That's a good way to get information and to get backstory across. But you got to make sure that it doesn't bog down your story.
Something I think we as Foundry authors, and especially Star Trek Foundry authors, is I think we tend to overdo our backstories. The backstory should really be almost incidental to the plot. Your plot should work even without a lot of backstory. The backstory should really be there to add flavor to the plot.
Mm-hmm. You don't even have to tell all of it.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, if going through your mission, it's often really good to take a step back and say, well, all of these things are explained, but really they don't have any particular bearing on the plot. Do I really need them? I mean, it's a great way to trim things down.
It reminds me of a discussion I've often had with various fictional works, where people who are talking about it are like, okay, so where'd this guy come from? And they pick out this minor side character that no one really paid attention to in the story, and he was just kind of like not an extra, but halfway close to an extra that the writers didn't bother writing a backstory for because he was a minor character. Yeah. I mean, at some point you have to draw this line, like, okay, I can't write out everything in the universe because Well, that would require, way too much work to be really worth it.
Yeah, how many nameless ensigns were there in Star Trek? Does having a name really make a difference?
Many,
Um,
many, many, many. So one of the things that I, back when I was in college and taking some creative writing classes, one of the things I came across is a character sheet, because we're talking about characters. Characters also need backstory. We have, I'm sure you can find some online, but a character sheet is simply, it includes all the kind of background information on a character that you might need to write that character. Now, you don't necessarily have to include any of that in the story, but as long as you, the writer, know that, that helps you write that character and create their interactions with the other characters.
Yeah,
And
well,
it informs all of that, but you don't necessarily have to include any of it in the story.
Yeah, it's stuff like where's this person's hometown, etc. But you're not going to bring that up in every episode. You might bring it up occasionally, but you know.
Yeah, and we as authors have a tendency
you only bring it up if it's logical to be brought up.
Yeah, I mean, we as authors have a tendency to, because we went to all the trouble of developing this backstory, we want to include it because we think it's a cool backstory and all this good stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's ancillary to the plot. Actually, often the same can be said of exposition. Where Star Trek is notoriously bad for very lengthy exposition.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, we can understand that the warp core has been infused with Verteron particles, causing a cascade failure of the EPS manifolds. But really, the important part is the warp core is going to breach.
And you notice what they often do after those lengthy technical explanations is they have somebody sum it up really succinctly.
Yeah.
And as Foundry authors, that's something you can do, or you can just cut out the lengthy technical explanation.
But I mean, Star Trek definitely has a tendency to create elaborate exposition, most often to cover arbitrary events.
Yeah. Space magic.
Like
people complained about, in Star Trek Into Darkness, how the quote magic blood, which did have a technobabble explanation, by the way, cured Kirk, and it's like, oh, that's far from the first time Star Trek has done that.
Well, the funny thing about that particular plot element is that it's not the first time they've done it. I mean, they established in the later or in the first episode with the augments that they were, ridiculously hard to kill.
That's actually my only criticism of that film is that, well, not my only criticism, but my main one is that every plot point you can trace back to has been done somewhere else in Star Trek, but that's beside the point.
Did you ever see the How It Should Have Ended YouTube video? Or
not for that.
For Into Darkness?
I'm a big fan of their Terminator one.
I may have to include that in the show notes. It ends with Kirk and Spock show up to start their 5-year mission, and the guy there's like, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. We got these long distance transporters now. We don't need starships, and nobody dies anymore because we have magic blood."
Plot hole there.
Yeah. So Starfleet's just into geriatrics because nobody dies.
Yep. Well, guys, it is getting towards time for Smirk's live stream, so we are going to end things here, I think. So, Dragoon,
and go watch Smirk's live stream.
Yeah, because we all want to watch it.
All right. We can be reached at email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also found on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Mark here can be reached at Markhawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon. And if you want one of those custom Odyssey MSDs, send me a note there.
Fantastic. But for now, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.